welcome everybody to this virtual presentation that we're having to do because sadly we can't come to Bergamo this September, which is a very sad state of affairs, but it's important that we all stay safe. And so this is our virtual recording or our virtual presentation with Piet Oudolf. And I'm representing Archetypos, and this is the Landscape Festival, or Il Maestro del Paesaggio. So Piet, good morning. You're at home in your garden, aren't you?
No, in the office for the moment.
In the office. But you've spent this summer at home with Anya.
I think I start traveling the end of August.
Yeah.
Therefore, it feels more comfortable to stay at home. Of course, we do our shopping and our errands and some meetings in the Netherlands, but all very carefully, and I think it works. Great.
And that must have been a really nice for you to spend time at home for a change instead of all the traveling.
Yeah, it feels relaxed in a way because of course my work, in one or other way, my work, there's no stress on my work, and staying at home makes that your tempo is lower than normal.
Yeah.
But still a lot to do, but it feels good, relaxed. Good. I think more people have that.
Yeah, I think so. And today we're going to talk about one of your recent projects, is that right?
That is right. That is the Vitra Campus.
The Vitra Campus, which is in Germany. Yeah.
That's in Germany, near to Basel.
I just have to let my dog out of the office. Hang on. Go on, out. Noisy dog. Sorry, I have a noisy dog. Right. So we're going to talk about a very recent project at the Vitra Campus. So would you like to start the screen share and then we can start the presentation?
All right, we could do.
Let's do that.
Share. Can you see the presentation now?
Yeah, but we just need to go to the first slide. Yeah.
Can you see this?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely perfect. Wonderful.
Okay, now this is my latest project, and it was done during Corona lockdown by Bettina Jortstetter, from the wife of Cassian Smith, who's a landscape architect, and we wanted to finish this project. And the fact, because you lose a year if you don't do it this spring, and all the plants were ready, but I was lucky to find someone who has the knowledge of plants and also from planting implementation, that she wanted to help me on this project fully. So I was sitting at home, and in fact she did all the work, and we worked on distance with a lot of telephone calls, and of course we did some good preparation. So this is Vitra House. It's on the Vitra Campus, and it is the design store of Vitra furniture. It's the flag store. Can I say the flag store? But at least it's the
you can say flagship. Yeah.
So you see, first Vitra was just well known about these famous buildings of Gehry and other famous architects that they put on the property, and that became a spot for all architects to go and see those. But last year or 2 years ago, I think the former CEO, Rolf Veelbaum, came to me. He wanted a garden. He said, I just think that Vitra needs a garden. And I think that is when we came over to have a look. And you see, this is the area in front of that Vitra house where you see all the furniture displayed. And there was an artwork, although you wouldn't say but it is an artwork around a cherry tree, and also a fountain on the left-hand side, a fountain also by an artist. And I think that is what I found, a little bit of modulation that was part of the fountain. We had to really take that in mind with the design. I think important for the owner is that all the art will be respected. So everything they do, you cannot really move without the permission of the artist. So you see, so we created a garden in that area, which is approximately 4,000 square meters. And you see, if I look here, the oak tree and the fountain. In fact, here's Vitra House, if you see the cursor.
Yeah, we can see that. We can see that clearly, Piet.
The cursor, okay. We were not allowed to go right into the garden because we had to break through a wall, who was also from an artist. So we had to go around. This is the entrance, and here's an entrance. And for me, important in gardens is circulation, so that you can just move yourself through the planting and see as much as possible and feel as much as possible while you're working in it. So you see, we were just filming the whole process, and of course that has stopped. And on the left-hand side, you see the owner, Rolf Veelbaum, with his first guy that is helping out with setting out the planting. Yeah, so the whole garden exists out two types of planting, and everyone that is a plants person and a designer knows what a matrix planting is nowadays. That is a planting where one or more species are dominant as a basis of the design. And together with other plants that emerge from that, you create a garden that looks more wild and more sort of natural. You see, this is a section A of that planting, which is had this sort of little groups. This is also around the building, a similar type of planting. You can see this is a matrix planting, this as well. So it's one dominant plant that is here, Sesleria, and here's Sporobolus, where all these little groups come from. You see an example of a matrix planting. You see this here, Molinia is the sort of dominant plant with other plants coming out of that. Another example, Sporobolus as a matrix with echinacea coming out, and of course more plants. This is just a simple example. Sesleria with some echinacea and liatus. So matrix planting combined with individual and small groups. That's what we did there, and that creates this sort of visual wildness in this area. So this is probably give you a rough idea how that area A will look like. I give you the names of the plants, which probably are, yeah, it will be too short for you to note it down, but you can always take a screenshot for yourself to have an idea what is in that area. Then we have 3 block areas, block planting areas. A planting design that is built out of groups. We call it blocks. I formally call that group planting. That sounds a little bit more friendly. Block is so rigid, but you see we have a type that is really a block and a type that is more fluent. You can see that. So that a block planting not necessarily means to be a planting that exists out of blocks. Here you can see an example of a block planting. You really see the groups next to another group, but from a distance it creates a sort of visuality that it looks really rather soft. Here's another example of a group planting around a natural swimming pool. But the block planting says that your group is next to another group to combine, to make a beautiful combination. Also, that combination should be a nice, has a nice sort of repetition through the whole area so that it doesn't look really rigid. So a block planting combined with individuals and small groups. That is normally what we did here. You see the blocks, which in this area B are rather fluent instead of really blocky. And here we have the little individuals that give that planting, that loosens up the planting and gives it a sort of, unites the groups together over over the whole area. Here you see that the individuals are repeating, and that makes your eye moving through that planting. And so you lose the idea of looking at blocks. Not really, but you know, it gives the idea of a sort of coherency and flow. So scatter plants, that is what we also use, that they can have can be individual, appear random, and they can be important in particular seasons. If, for instance, if we have a papaver that flowers in June and will be gone in July, August. So May, June, it starts flowering and then it disappears, goes underground and comes back next year. Another one that is also a scatter plant that stays flowers all summer. So that can be used as functions through the whole planting. That is, but that a scatter plant we normally don't use in groups, more individual, loosely scattered through a group or through the planting in general. Another one, Asclepias incarnata, also we call that a scatter plant. Scatter plants not necessarily need to be perennial, they can be biennial. They can, what we want with them is to create that sort of spontaneity. Schizocerium, a new variety, we found that with Cassian Smith in his trial garden in Weinheim. A beautiful grass that is really standing up and gives that extra sort of punctuality in the garden. But you can use it as a group, but I use it more individual. Or a potentilla. Also plant is very nice, but I cannot imagine to use a group of 20 or 60 of these plants together. It's nicer to let them weave through an individual group. So combine it with another group of plants. Or this Echinacea olandese, or any other pallida that you know that will live short and just appears in other places after a few years than where you planted it originally. Like Penicillium viridescens, also a plant that flowers very late. So this has a seasonal sort of function in the garden that you know, it starts flowering in September, I think, August, September, rather late, some species. Or Baptisia that flowers in the spring, already is in seed, but that is in May. So what I say, it has various functions. So it can be mixed with a group, it can be just all over the place, a sort of repetitional, but also seasonal, like this Heugera, maybe for the color, that you give a little color spots through the garden. But I say seasonality is also essential in a garden, and I think that, of course, if you make a garden that only looks good in spring, then you have nothing in the summer. Everyone knows that. If you have a summer garden and you have nothing in spring, then it takes a long time before it's July. You know, we all long for gardens already in February. It's a little flowering, but around your house. But the garden needs to be interesting over all seasons. This is later in the season. You can see August, September, October, November. We take care that we design with plants that also have can attract you later in the seasons when they set seed. They benefit not only the eye, but also insects with their seed heads and insects to hide for the winter. That is our garden, December, January. You know, then the skeletons become very important. And I think we have to cut it down and, you know, what we normally do in February. But this is the sort of look you find when you have the right plants planted together, and you can still see there's a variation in color. Also in the winter, the color is not only brown or not only blonde, it can be still gray or bluish or orangey. So it's good to notice that gardening is not an easy thing. Garden design is not so easy. It's I can imagine if you have a small garden that is not about garden design, it's about the plants you like. And I think then I would say just buy what you like and just put it together, and you know, when it's wrong, but you still have the joy of enjoying your plants. But we have to, I cannot say entertain a larger audience, so we need to make our design right for the eye. So it has to do with aesthetics. It has to do with what I said, seasonality. It has to do with so many more things, but knowing your plants. So this is Vitra from above. And the layout, you see, it's real Swiss perfection, so to say. It's on the Swiss border, and I think it's, if I'm right, a Swiss company. But you see the artwork we worked around, and this is the fountain. So from the house, we have to walk from the Vitra house to here. We couldn't break through the wall. That was our first option, but we have to go around and go the path, and then we go into the garden, which is not bad, you know. It just doesn't matter at all for the design. So we lay it out, and I think you see it's a lot of plants. We use approximately we use 9 centimeters pots, I think, in general, and some grasses we can only buy in 11 or 13 centimeters, which is not bad. Individual plants that we want to plant that are slow growers, like Baptisia, we buy in bigger pots. But in general, our calculation counting of plants per square meter goes by is based on 9 centimeter pots. So first again, we go to the matrix planting. That is where one or more species are dominant, what we said. So to set out the planting, we have to provide a drawing with a grid, like you see here. And the grid is probably 2.5 meters on each line. It depends on how big the garden is. So it could be 2 meters, could be 3 meters, depends on the scale, but that you can see with the grid on your drawing, like here on the matrix and on the ground, we can see that we really have to transfer the drawing on the ground to make it work. And also we need to know how many plants in each, if I go back, you see the count of the plants is already on the spot, but also when the plant storage is far from your bed, you have to go with a label with a number on it. But if you pick a label out of the soil, it's good to see where it is placed. So here you see how we do that. And for the block planting, we provide a drawing with the same sort of size, 2.5 by 2.5 meter in this case. It is transferred to the ground, and we use a spray or fine sand to draw the lines. So you see, this is the block planting, and it's a similar sort of process. You can print it on a good scale paper that you can read it. You can put the plant list with the numbers on the side. If you, it's not really necessary. You can already read it or put it separate in an Excel list for yourself. And here you also see which section it is. And when you look underneath, is section B3, that is so-and-so. And that is, you see that, show you a little bit more. It's all sprayed out by people. You can do it with sand, you can do it with road paint, you can do it with anything that stays on the ground. And I think we've done it with fine sand, and here you see the grid. And that is where we work from. And I think if you've done this, it is really easy to set it out. Here you see the mix of some, I think, Actea, Simicifuga, with some other grasses, perennials, and now I'm going to show you some perennials in each area. So this area, which is a matrix, you can see the smaller groups. I'm going to do a selection of plants because that will, in fact, give you an idea. This is the matrix. We use Sporobolus in section A as a basis, and then Asclepias, not only for the color, but also for their seed heads. I think that is Baptisia for seasonality. That is early in May that it flowers. And then, of course, the Echinacea to scatter around in among the Sporobolus. So here you see the Helenium. That is a group that is not only for the color, it repeats itself. And I think that is also beautiful when they start to decline, then the seed heads become like little buttons. And I think that is, so you can profit from this plant not only by the flower, it has a long flowering period, but also by the seeds after flowering. Persicaria alba, because that creates a sort of, it's a very easy plant. You see it's very transparent. It looks very nice with all the other plants. It is not really rampant or aggressive. It, of course, it grows. It's less growing than the red variety, the Persicaria amplexicala firetail or fire dance. So the white one is very elegant, and I'd like to use that in sort of masses or repeating, especially with grasses. Sanguisorba menziesi, this is a variety that flowers also in June, July, or June, yeah. So that also creates that sort of punctions of red in June when not so many perennials are in flower. So it's also a seasonal aspect that I create, that I use in between the plants. And also the schizogerium. They start flowering because they know it's a sort of warm seasonal grass. It's a prairie plant and it starts really growing now. So the last month it starts growing and it flowers rather late. You see it here in the context with some litrum. Litrum, it's virgatum, it's not the one we see and that is forbidden to use in the USA. This is a litrum virgatum. It's an unknown species, but now we have swirl, which is used a lot. And we have now 3 different shades of pink. So it's the deep pink, it's the sort of very light, and it's the sort of pink lilac we use. So perennials for B. B, you see, that is this sort of group planting, and where the plants you see in the groups have a sort of height that is not higher or taller than 120, and then the exceptions are the plants that come out and that create a sort of individual height in among this sort of flat meadow-like type planting. So here you see the groups are rather fluent, and one of the plants I'd like to use is Amsonia hubertii. Here, of course, you see in the back, you see this, the Echinacea pallida, beautiful afterflower and a good contrast. And I think the Amsonia colors its flowers. The flowers are not so interesting as the Amsonia montana, but I think the autumn color is more spectacular. And also the leaves are beautiful, fine, and colors. They start coloring here, you see that. And really spectacular in fall. On the right-hand side, you see the Erynchium eucyphorium, also a beautiful plant to use, a bit loose and hanging over, but it makes it all more spontaneous. Like Anemonem pamina, also a family of let's say, a Japanese anemone, not too tall, I think a meter, 1.20 meters, but for the color and the flowering time, very, very nice to use. This is Artemisia, the lactiflora kishu. That is that perennial that becomes 182 meters, but that is very loose, and you can just mix it in some of the plants as a repetitional element over the whole area, that it shows up in groups out of your existing planting. I think that makes it very interesting. And Asclepias incarnata. It's short-lived. I think it's one of these milkweeds that is about 140, and it's sort of elegant, beautiful flower heads, as you can see, and also the seed heads are, as you saw in an earlier picture of Asclepias, they are sort of very fine, sort of silky seeds that are blown away by the wind, and so they nestle easy in little caps in a planting, and they will probably they do it very well in the garden. And you know, you lose it in one place, you get it in another place. I think we have it already for 20 years in the garden, and it's never at the same place. Although, and so don't relate on it, just use it, and you see it's never in the way. Aster twilight is also one of these asters that flowers over a long period, and where the seed heads also are very interesting after flowering. It's a midsummer flowerer. It starts flowering now. I think so. It's August, September, long flowering period. On the right-hand side, you see one of the litrums, I think litrum swirl, and you see the Solidaster lemur, if I'm right. And some in the background, you see the Molinia transparent. And yeah, so, and also in this section, we use Molinia Moor hexe. I think that if you have the right one, if they, you know, if they provide you with the right I wouldn't say species, but cultivar, then you have the black flowering one, which is beautiful in contrast also with your other perennials sticking out. Astilbophysians in pink. Some people don't like astilbes. Maybe I don't like them either, but I use them. And why do I use them? Because they stay after flowering, they stay all winter till next spring. It's a beautiful contrast. I think the form is good in contrast with other people. So never say you don't have to like all plants to use all plants. It's more that you look at the effect, what they have over a longer period in combination with other plants. So planting design is creating communities of people or plants that go well together. Monarda, also short-lived, but the seed heads they can be very tricky. There are some species or some cultivars now that have less mildew, powdery mildew. So Monarda neon is one of them. I think Bradburyiana, which is an early flowerer, that is also a Monarda that hardly has any mildew. Ericrossus spectabilis, beautiful grass. It's called love grass. It's about 40 centimeters tall. Also as a ground cover, its beautiful purple inflorescence makes it really useful for the kind of natural gardens. Stagis, Moneri attract bumblebees and bees. So, but again, also your plants can attract more than people's eyes. I think it's insects and butterflies, everything that wildlife in your garden is also important and can be sort of stimulated by the plants you use as well. So the perennials for C, I think the perennials for C, and let's see, yeah, okay, these are the borders that are on the edge of the garden. So, and they have a backdrop of a tall hedge. So the plants used here are rather tall. They approximately, the tallest are 250. So they range from about 120 to 250, and they created by big groups to create a big impact. And also they give you a sort of intimate feeling when it is mature. So the middle pieces of the garden are in fact not higher than 120, 140, so you can look over those perennial meadows easily and so experience the whole garden, while this is just the end or the edge of the garden where a backdrop by a hedge or tall hedge or shrubs where I wanted the plants to be taller. Astrolito Carlo is not the best example, but it's used as a mix-in, but you can see Cephalaria gigantea, one of these giants, which seeds around, but I think it's an easy plant to remove, but I mixed that up with other perennials because it's too sort of loose to give, to have this weight in a garden, but it's nice plant to scatter around, but you have to control it. But this plant, so like the Eupatorium, is one of my favorites for public space. It's a plant that lives forever. It can become 100 years or older at least. You never get bored by it, one, and on the other hand, you never lose it. So it's good to use in public space. Public space, of course, needs plants that survivors. Echinopsis Fights Blue is another plant that you won't lose, only when it's too wet, I think, or the But normal as a garden plant, it's always there and always enjoys you, and not only for the color, which is a steel blue or yeah, sort of sharp blue, but it's also a bee and butterfly attractor in all ways. Also for, you can imagine after flowering, when it sets seed, then birds will dive on it, you know, to pick on the seeds, which is also nice to see. Or Philopendra rubra, it's early flowering. If your soil is not too light, not too sandy, then it will really be a beautiful plant. Not too late in the season. It's now just out of flower, 14 days, so it flowers in July, early July, and I think that is. But when it fades, and even in autumn, it creates this beautiful sort of glowy seed heads. You know, you see the stems, the flower stems, they start to glow and darker, and I think beautiful contrast. And here also Helenium. This cultivar will become a 1.50 meters, 160. Beautiful as a big group. And on the left-hand side, you see the Molinia transparent. That goes very well with those, you know, plants that are really sort of clumpy, dense, are benefit by the use of taller grasses. So I think that is by very transparent grasses. So that's why I like to use the taller Molinias or the Stipa gigantea, although Stipa gigantea is gone now, but there's Molinia is a very good grass to use. And here we have the Lignus, also 150, a plant that flowers together with your delphiniums. So if you use delphiniums and Lignus, it's not hard to obtain. I think I'm glad that some growers are starting to grow it again, but it's a beautiful plant that also stays after flowering, attractive in seed heads, and the color is a color you wouldn't see so much in gardening. Phlox, and we, let's say in the early 80s, we got one phlox, and that was called Phlox paniculata, a wild form. We still grow it, it's still grown again, and it's a beautiful small flowered phlox that originally came from Dixter, and we just introduced it again 2 years ago. I hope it will just find its way into the world. It's a mildew-free phlox, no diseases. It's it depends on where it is. It's 160, 180, 160 in height, but good to control. Of course, easy to control because it doesn't do anything than just grow and stay put. The right-hand side, you see the inula, which is not everybody's favorite color, but it's a beautiful plant, you know, especially in a wild setting. Can seed around a little bit, but this is Inula magnifica. It's not such, it's a cedar, but not as strong as most of the others. As an individual, I used then the sanguisorba, this blackthorn. It's a form selected in England on a nursery, blackthorn nursery, Robin White. I know that I visited him and that we found this plant, and since then it's around, but not in masses, but it's one of the better ones because it doesn't fall over, it doesn't break. It starts flowering now, and I think it is good for, yeah, together with all the other sanguisorbas who are sometimes a bit tricky. Selinum walchianum. So umbellifers, I think umbellifers were, I think not anymore, very underrated years and years ago when we started gardening. Grasses, umbellifers were not done in gardens. Nowadays you see many umbellifers coming into gardens, you know, from Selinum to Sinolophium and other Gerophyllum, all these plants, and it's hard to find perennial umbellifers. You know that, Sinolophium and Lasapitium and Selinum, they are rather perennial. Also Melopspermum, Peloponnesiacum. You see in the background, you see Lobelia, you see the Echinacea, you see some Persicaria, so all great combinations. And I think Veronicastrum in all colors, there's white, pink, anything you want. It's erect, it's strong, also a plant that stays forever. And I think if you have the right variety, cultivar, it's a lot of pleasure for a long time in the garden. So the last section, that's section D, that is again a matrix planting, where the basis is a lower grass, that is Cecleria autumnalis, and that is mixed with Amsonia, small clumps of Amsonia tabernae montana farsadistifolia, which you see in you know, if you compare it with the Brechtii, the leaves are wider, the stems are blue when it comes out, and the flowers are more, has a stronger blue, steel blue color. Beautiful flowers earlier in the year. Aster latiflorus horizontalis has individuals into that Cecleria, so little bumps come out. At Deschampsia, also as individual little groups. And then some Euphorbia griffithii, and I think all together with the Cecleria, it gives you really a sort of tapestry of a sort of wildness that you can't find in the wild, but that really is beautiful. Also geranium for an early flowering sort of aspect. You cut them down after flowering because they're not very interesting only during the flowering period. And I think May, June, they're done now. Also some Heugera in little clumps into the Cecleria. It's a very nice combination. Salvia, sage will do very well with Cecleria. So Lobelia syphilitica, it's about 60 centimeters height. Very late flowering, let's say late summer flowering. So we always take care of that. Most flowering seasons are covered by one or other variety. So this is the end of the story. I hope that you enjoyed it and that we are just...
That was wonderful, Piet. Would you like to come back from screen share so that we can see you? That would be brilliant.
All right. Okay. So I stopped sharing.
Yeah, and then I think we've got time just for a couple of quick questions.
Yeah.
First of all, it's important that the Vitra Campus is actually open to the public, isn't it? So people can go and see. Yeah,
people can go see the shop and the gardens. It's a public garden. It's one of the few public gardens there in that area.
Yeah.
I think they're very happy
for people to visit.
Having one.
Yeah.
I think that it's also very contributing with the building. So.
Yeah. And is your garden the only garden in the campus, or are there other gardens there?
No, it's the only garden in the campus. So I think that is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of space, to be honest. But
yeah. And
when
they were asking you to do the design, whose decision was it to make this purely perennial and have no shrubs or trees? Or I know you've got hedging around the outside, but whose decision was that for the design?
No, I was rather free in my design. I think if you make a perennial meadow, perennial planting, and you put shrubs and trees into it, then it will disappear quickly.
Yeah.
There's still a cherry tree in the back that we have to cover it with ground cover. So if you use trees, you have to do another planting concept. And we wanted to make a very dynamic space.
Yeah.
And of course, I love trees. I've done millions of trees. Let's say, that's what Trump would say. I've done millions of trees, but I've done a lot of tree and woodland. But this is, in fact, based on dynamics, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so it's really interesting to look at one project in detail with you, I think, and working through the process and the plant choices. That's really useful rather than looking lots and lots of projects. With the maintenance, let's say for this particular project, how do you go about setting up and organizing the maintenance that's ongoing from once it's planted? You know, how do you liaise with the people who are there gardening? What's your system for doing that?
No, yeah, when it happens that they want me to just stay involved, which not always happens. You know that yourself. I think it's partly the quality of the garden is of course, it comes by how it is supported afterwards, you know, by the stewardship of the owner, and I think that also the gardeners and how much the gardener is interested in gardening. So there's so many aspects after you have delivered your work that can make the garden
succeed,
a success or not.
Yeah.
And I think that is here the owner is very keen on having we have already a head gardener.
Good. Yeah.
It's a beautiful place. I would love to come back, and he wants me to come back. So they want me to come back to oversee and the process. And also, if I cannot do it, there's always someone like Bettina or someone else has the same sort of interest and knowledge that can just carry the quality of the garden.
That's important. So how many times a year would you necessarily like to visit a project like that if you have the time?
No, normally we do the first year and then every second year to make because if you have a good gardener, it's more that you follow what the garden does. You know, some plants seed too much, then you take them out. But any good gardener will know that. But also, you have the garden to allow to not. You don't want the garden to stay the same. So there are things that happen that look good.
Yeah, it has to evolve.
Like that, you know, it lives. Sometimes a garden lives its own life, of course, within restrictions of what we want.
Yeah, and I think you made a really interesting point when you were talking about the astilbes, that it's important not to necessarily just use the plants that you love yourself, that you're using plants because of what they're going to offer the community of, and that's important because it's very easy to leave out plants that you don't like, isn't it?
Yeah, no, but let's say also, you're right, you're very right. Of course, it's really true, but I think about it, why do I use this plant? And I always, you know, because it's not my favorite, but I need it for, you know, this, it's a choice you make to make the garden at its, the best garden you have made before.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a really
plants that I think, I really like them? No, but I learned myself just to use plants for what they do.
Yeah. No, that's important. And then one final question: when going back to the matrix planting, I suppose I'm guessing that you have to choose very carefully the plants that you're using within, you know, that are the sort of feature plants within the matrix, so that they don't get swamped by the bulk, you know, say the Sporobolus or the Cecularia or whatever you're using. So you have to choose the feature plants, the scatter plants, quite carefully, I assume.
You need to, let's say you lose some at the end, of course, because in the beginning you use more than you probably will need.
Yeah.
And that is normal. So I don't mind, but at least the basis of everything that you put in, like if I put in Stagis, or Asclepias tuberosa, they compete with the Sporobolus. The Sporobolus is a clump-forming grass, so there's always space in between. And if you really want to do something extra, then you plant some extra Acastacia when you lose them. So it depends where it is. But the basis of all the plants that we put in a sort of matrix planting should be very strong.
Yeah.
Asclepias tuberosa, Stagis, call it Achillea, the good ones, the Digeteas and so on.
Yeah. Whenever I go to Hauser and Wirth in Bruton in the early summer and I look at the Eremurus, I'm always in awe of how they, you know, can compete with all the plants around them, and I'm always so jealous that how do you do that? It's like magic.
I could do it there, but it doesn't happen in my garden too.
Well, at least that's good to know. Listen, Piet, we could talk for hours, but I know we were on a strict time scale with these talks, and we know that you've been to Bergamo, I think, on 3 occasions, haven't you? You've been lecturing and doing the workshops with Valfreda, and you designed the Piazza Vecchia a couple of years ago, and so I think we're all going to miss not being in Bergamo this year, but hopefully we'll all be together there again, you know, very soon.
Next year, yes. I'm very pleased that we could do this way, and I wish all the people in the audience at home yeah, a very good gardening year for the rest of what it is, you know, after September, and for next year, I hope to see that we can see each other again.
Yeah, let's hope so. Thank you so much, Piet. That's been really interesting, and I look forward to seeing the Vitra garden as well. That will definitely be one on my list to go and visit.
Okay, so I close down now.
I think so.